And welcome to the Front Row Back Row podcast. I am your host, Owen Campbell, Dr. Owen Campbell, got to be fancy, owner of Simplify Motion Physical Therapy. And with me is Dr. Brian Wolf, owner of Evolution Physical Therapy and Fitness. Brian, how you doing today?
Oh man, I'm good. I'm good. Let's do this.
Nice. So today we are going to be talking about how to market yourself and a conversation on branding. So for those of you listening, this is going to touch every single healthcare provider out there, whether you are working at a giant monster mega corporation where you have responsibilities within branding, all the way within marketing and supporting their brand, all the way down to somebody who just started out and they need to figure out what their first Instagram post is going to be.
Exactly.
Everybody who would be really important in the space, we have represented here, right? Because Brian is a clinic owner. He has 4 locations on the East Coast in Connecticut and Long Island. I am just starting out as my own cash-based mobile physical therapist, but I also have history working for some of those bigger companies. So, how you doing today, Brian?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
Good,
This is a good one.
good.
It's an interesting topic for sure.
Yeah. So the first thing I want to talk about is something that's pretty near and dear to my heart right now. Well, first, I want to define the difference between marketing and branding. I was listening to a speaker a few months ago, and he said, PTs need to understand that marketing is just getting your name out there. It is making sure people know who you are, that you're there, and what value you can give them. Now, branding, as I assume, and you've done way more branding than I have, branding is more just making sure that everything singularly fits and that in the market you are always conveying a single thing from your water bottles all the way down to your billboards, right? So that's how I see the difference of it. Is kind of what you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to, I think first off, it's important to understand that marketing and branding are two different things, right? And I
Yeah.
think the reason that it's important to understand is marketing is about acquiring customers, right?
Yeah.
Marketing is about, and that could be a difference of how to, we'll talk about how to measure it and all those things too. But as far as, marketing is concerned, it's, I want to get clients in the door who are going to pay money for services, right? And that's in
Hmm.
any business.
Yep.
And as far as branding, that is going to be, like to your point about understanding what the whole, like if I think about that, like when I think of brands, like famous brands, I think of like
Hmm.
Nike,
Yeah.
Adidas, right? And so one of the things that I think is important about marketing and in terms of like how we acquire those customers, whether it's social media, whether it's through newspaper ads, through working on some sort of different aspect in terms of like a community event, right?
Hmm.
Branding is going to be about how I can associate things with my brand, along with how I can associate my brand with other brands. And
Hmm.
so, a great example of this that you see in professional sports is if you think about Nike, they get athletes, they
Hmm.
sponsor different sports. They'll bring out cool colors to doing stuff with runners to the
Hmm.
Olympics. They have made their brand synonymous with athletes. And so, I think that when it comes to the brand, we'll all know what that Nike swoosh is, and we'll be like, we know what that is, and that's branding.
Hmm.
I think the difference of what's of the two is that branding is the long game, takes a
Hmm.
long time.
Yep.
Marketing and getting a person can be today, right? And
Yeah.
so that's a big piece in the differences. The
And
story that I like to use for branding that I
yeah.
heard from Alex Hormozy, I think it's an amazing. He's a smart entrepreneur, brilliant past gym owner. He was
Hmm.
like, imagine branding is like a bouquet of flowers,
Okay.
and so in the beginning, when you're first starting your business, you are kind of that accessory flower, right?
Yeah.
And so what you want to do is attach your accessory flower to another bouquet, right?
Hmm.
And eventually over time, you become kind of like the rose, like you become like the nice part of the bouquet. And then other people start to want to attach to you.
Yep.
And then what you need to be careful of over time is the wilting flower effect, is that all of a
Yeah.
sudden someone who attaches to your brand isn't the wilted flower. Because the
Yeah.
reality is, if I hand my wife a set of flowers and one's wilted over, It does that. That's the difference in branding. Is if I hand you that, that's why people lose their brands and their sponsorships when they do something stupid. Is because
Oh
in
yeah.
theory they're the wilted flower, and so it's like, ooh, but like you're that, you're with them. So like it's
Yeah.
that's the difference in brand association, is you're trying to attach that and trying to create that.
Yeah, the example I love to think about is the lemonade stand, right? Marketing is the sign on the front of the table and the girl screaming, right?
Yeah.
The brand is maybe that lemonade stand makes some money and they are an organic brand. Maybe they have nice soft muted blues that they put on their cups. That's more of the brand,
I
right?
love that.
That's the mentality I like to think about when I'm trying to get out there, is that I'm in that marketing mode, right? I am in, people need to know I'm here. People need to know what I do. It's just a very straightforward conversation with whoever is either on the other side of that phone, other side of the handshake, whatever it is. Yes, I'm conscious a little bit about brands. I want to make my logo look nice, eventually maybe down the road. But right now, I just need people to be customers, right?
Yeah.
So I find that I'm doing a very much, I'm almost finding that I need to put things online just so that I continue to be associated with, oh, he has a business now. He's not working for them now, right? Um, and then I think you're very much in the branding space where you may not be putting out an Instagram reel that says, "Oh, by the way, we're good with athletes and ACLs." What you're doing is sponsoring somebody, or what you're doing is, taking a picture of you in the middle of a stadium,
Yeah.
things like that that are more speaking to the brand.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of like segueing what we're talking about is when to market to patients versus when to start branding, and
Mm-hmm.
I think you can also start branding now, right? Like I
Yeah.
think that's something you can do, because I think the brand can also be based off of the mission, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
for evolution and our mission, it's a couple different things. One is to change the perception of physical therapy. And
Mm-hmm.
so, particularly in the athletic space, so physical therapists were not known to be, working with professional soccer teams and football
Mm-hmm.
teams and baseball teams and do that. Like we were meant to be in hospitals, right? Like that's what
Yep.
everybody told us we had to do. And so we
Yeah.
wanted to change that perception of where we went, right? Number one.
Yeah.
Number two is to bridge the gap between rehab and performance. So I think that's a huge piece when it comes to fitness and when
Yeah.
it comes to physical therapy and how that works, and making sure that that's not,
Uh,
and the story that I remember was when during my clinical affiliation, my very first one, I remember working with a client who had Parkinson's,
yeah.
and he was paying cash for basically physical therapy because his Medicare benefits had exhausted, and it's because, oh,
Mm-hmm.
he had plateaued and couldn't get any better, so therefore Medicare wouldn't medically justify and pay for that treatment.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
obviously that's since changed with some maintenance stuff, but that was back when we first came out, and that was a
Yeah. There was
thing,
no maintenance. Yeah.
right? And so the reality is now he had to pay cash. And I remember thinking, I was like, well, why don't we have more fitness oriented programs that we could put him in? That'd be
Yeah.
awesome to have. And so
Yeah.
we developed those systems, right? For
Mm-hmm.
athletes, to weekend warriors, to high school athletes and college athletes, to, older folks too. Like, so I think from that perspective, what's happened from the marketing to patients is, to your point, you're trying to get that one client that comes through the door that kind
Mm-hmm.
of maybe believes in your mission, but because you're just starting out, you're like, man, I need like to start cash flow. I need to like get some of this stuff in. So I'll take the person here or there who doesn't necessarily fit the mission, because I'm trying to get to grow to the future mission, and so I can help and serve more people. Whereas the
Yeah.
branding is like, hey, like, yeah, like I'm associated with New York City Football Club. We did stuff with the Premier Lacrosse League. We did stuff with Burton Snowboards. We've done stuff with the LA Marathon. We've done stuff with, LAFC. We've done stuff with, endless teams, so that we can basically start the conversations with other teams, where I can be like, hey, like, we've done this in the past and we can do this with you too. And this is what our
Yeah.
brand is, and we're on brand. Down to the website looks like that. It caters to athletes. It's, a great story and a great way to think about branding and marketing
Mm-hmm.
is find your perfect client, your perfect patient, that this is who I
Mm-hmm.
want to see. And everything revolves around that. So every decision that I'm making is, what's your your perfect patient, and how am I getting more of those people? And
Yeah.
so that's what you want to tie your whole brand around.
Well, and that can look really different, right? So I was just trying to find the name. It kills me because I can't credit him, but there's a PhD, PT PhD, who is writing on the topic of business and how physical therapy and business intersect, right? And what you just said about like how to find your perfect patient, he's for people who take insurance, doctors tend to be a pretty high referral source, and with as much as is on social media about it, it still is a pretty solid bet that if you have a physician or an orthopedic surgeon especially who likes you, you're going to see a lot of people, especially if you take insurance, right? But I think his major point was that is shifting, right? And his big thing is that if you were to look at technology 10 years ago and what was coming out then, AI was nothing, right? Now it's everybody, right? So his point was that there's first movers, right? And I'd say you're a first mover. Then there's people kind of like me who are following in saying, yeah, let's go directly to patient. Let's go direct to consumer, I guess is what they call it in business parlance. And really kind of moving away. But I even remember when I was in a big corporate clinic, we had my clinic had maybe 20% direct access, right?
Yeah.
When I first started out, it was maybe two, right? 2%.
Yeah.
So if you don't get on that, getting in the patient's wheelhouse, where meet them where they're at, you should be doing it. So obviously, social media is a great way to do that. Be in their pocket, but really, you got to find the community, right? Like you guys have done a really good job of finding communities. I know out in your LA affiliates, they're all about run clubs. I see
Yep.
everything, evolution run clubs, and they're always constantly participating, but that's their target consumer. That's what they want to see most of, and they spend their time there. And runners aren't looking at social media because they get hit by a car, right?
Exactly. That's
you
amazing.
know, but they love you to stretch them at the end of a race. So there you go.
I think too, when it comes to the branding conversation, if you're going down, and this is for every physical therapy practice, like insurance, cash based, whatever,
Mm,
right? If you're going directly to physicians and asking them for referrals, basically what you're doing is you're saying, I want you to depict what my brand will be. And I
they're
think
selling for you.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's what's happening in the physical therapy world. But here's the good news. I think that mold's changing.
Mm.
And I think the people that are faster to move in that direction, where they're able to basically like, get to a point where you can brand the community or brand yourself and actually go directly to consumers. I've had more conversations with athletic directors in the past month than I have any MD. So
Yeah.
like when you think about that, like I'm going
Yeah.
directly to the source of athletes
Yeah.
versus them. That's why I get more athletes. And so when you think about the aspect of going to the physician, they're controlling the narrative of what I am and who I'm seeing
You
and who I'm seeing,
you
right? And
want
so
to
that's going to ruin your brand.
you want to hear a great narrative I heard in my last few months working with another company. I would talk to a surgeon. He is well respected in the ACL and rotator cuff space, and he looks at me and goes, "Why would I send him down to you? Any idiot can rehab an ACL." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, all right. Well,
Yeah.
clearly we're the rehab guys and you're the cutter, right? Like
Yes.
so if that guy is trying to market me, I mean, he's got to be my marketer if it's only through physicians, right? So you have to rely on you telling your own story.
Yeah, man. I think a great quote that I actually heard from the one of the PTs I work with at New York City Football Club was, he was like, a lot of people can rehab. Most people that are in our profession can rehab an ACL
Mm,
between 0 to 4 months, 0 to 6 months. He was
mm,
like, what differentiates the physical therapist in our space is
mm.
what can you do from 4 to 9 months? What can
Yeah.
that person do from 6 to 9 months? Right when you're
Mm,
going back to sports, that's
yeah.
something I've said to physicians all the time. I said to physician-owned clinic, people, I'm like, go to the physician-owned clinic for the first 3 to 4 months. Go do that. But when you
Yeah.
get frustrated because of your lack their progress, come see me.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where I'm different. And that's where
Yeah.
I think that niche has played really well for
Yeah.
us is trying to find those athletes and be like, we can take that next step. Right.
Yeah.
And it's only continued to be with branding, with going into, some of these other places as well.
Yeah. So then my question is, because let's be honest, I only got a little bit of money to work with right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
I need my shots to hit the target. So
For sure.
how do I know if something I'm doing marketing wise or branding wise or either of them is working? I mean, obviously, anybody listening to this is going to say, well, there's if you're doing a Google ad, there's Google Analytics, and they tell you, or if you're I don't know if I haven't started the Facebook Instagram route, but I'm sure they try and throw some analytics on it. But what do you know as a business owner how to make that decision of where do I put my money? And
It's a
I
great,
mean, anything from where I'm at all the way up to, I mean, it's going to be different when you're trying to keep a brand alive.
yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the good news about measuring when you're trying to market and acquire a customer, to your point about the lemonade stand, right? Like
Mm.
if I'm screaming and someone sees me and hands me money to get a lemonade, I can measure that, right?
Yeah,
That's the how much did it cost me to get that customer to come see me? How
yeah,
much did I charge them for that? What's the difference? And there's my profit margin, right? So
yep,
like that's very simple math in that capacity. Branding's trickier, right? And so
yeah,
I think that the way that I would look at the two is when it comes to measuring marketing, you want to think about, all right, how much did I spend on marketing? And you could do this in a couple different ways. Like to your point about Google Analytics, you could look at Google, Instagram, community events, what you're doing on stuff. You could look at it as an entire whole, as an entire
mm,
budget. I think it's a little bit simpler, to be honest with you. But
yeah,
if you want to get in the weeds of very specifics, I think the better you can measure it, the more money you can feel confident that you can throw at it, right?
mm,
And then I think a really good thing that I'm recognizing is how to create a system that essentially you're getting paid to market. So right
mm.
now, for every dollar that we're spending on marketing, we're getting three back. So in essence, I don't have a marketing budget, right? I
Oh,
don't
okay.
I don't
You gotta explain that a little more
you
because
see what I'm saying?
that went over my
Got it.
head a little bit.
Got it. So if you think about the aspect of it's more than just the marketing. So again,
Okay.
let's use the lemonade analogy.
Okay.
If this person yelling, so I had to, let's say I got a sign at my lemonade stand, and
Mm,
I'm running around yelling with that sign. The cost of
mm,
acquiring the customer is my time plus me having this thing over my head, right?
mm.
And what it cost me to make this thing,
Yeah.
right? So say it cost me $4.
Yeah.
But if I now what's interesting about that is it's a fixed cost. So
Yeah.
if I sell five lemonades, let's call it for $2, I
Yeah.
got $10.
Yeah.
So for every $4 I put in, I'm getting $10 back
Yeah.
in essence in that capacity. So in
Uh-huh.
theory, you're like, let me get two signs, and maybe I hire another person. Now hiring that person, I got to pay that person. So by paying that person, I just increased my cost for acquiring that customer that we talked about. But I got
Yep.
them with a sign. So in theory, what you want to make sure is that profit margin is hefty enough so that in theory now we're doubling what we're doing at a minimum. So say I got
Okay.
to pay that person. Where I think people can get into trouble with business is say I had to pay that person $10 and it cost
Yeah.
me $4 to make that sign, and they only sell five lemonades at $2, I'm losing money.
Yeah.
So that's the measurement side of that, right?
Okay.
So I think that's the key to measure. So from a Facebook perspective, we put in about $1. We figured this out yesterday. Literally, it was like we put in $1, we're getting about three back. So the
Okay.
answer is like you can kind of now we can turn on the fire hose in theory
Yeah,
because we know,
because that's a great return. Yeah.
yeah, and the aspect of it is I think that's important is not just the actual marketing. There's so
Okay.
many pieces to this. It's the marketing and the message you're putting out, the ad you're putting out, but it's also the system that you're like how you're following up with the person when they're a lead, right?
Yeah.
How you're scheduling that person, how you're talking to that person that schedule. What are you
Hmm.
selling them, right?
Yeah.
As you're selling them, how much are you selling them for? Right? Because
Yeah.
that in essence is the lemonade, the money you're going to take to compare it back to the cost requiring the
Yeah.
customer. And so
And
once you
even
can look at that.
yeah, yeah, and sorry to cut you off, but even the
Yep.
most basic things of having your front desk person ask, "How'd you hear about us?" Right?
Yeah, for
What's the number
sure.
one thing? Because they might have heard you from three different things, but what was the one that was the most impactful?
Exactly.
All the way to having it on your form. Some people, it's always on their form. So
Yes. And
those are some of the things that I know I've done, and I think that knowing the higher end stuff of like this is how much we put in budget wise, this is what we got out. So if I put this in, I get this out. I'm happy with taking that risk, I think is also pretty important because then you can really kind of say, okay, our marketing, this is what it costs, this is how I know it's working, and this is what I need to do.
yeah. And I think the branding to go back to how do we know the branding's working? I mean, I think what begins to happen is you get it's a little more vague, right?
Yeah.
But it's a little less dollars and cents and a little more of, oh, I've heard of them. Oh, I've seen you guys, right? Like
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
that's the branding. I
Yeah.
think the other piece, and this is for the growth, is our brand is a fun brand. It's awesome. We work with
Yeah.
athletes. So like I attract other talent to come work for us, right? We have
Yeah.
physical therapists who want
Yeah.
to work with us, and that is gigantic. So I know that
Yeah.
brand is working
Yeah.
because other PTs want to go and do what we're doing. Other people want to be a part of what we're doing. Other patients tell people, you got to go check this place out. It's freaking awesome. Right. So
Yeah.
like working with sports organizations, like we have sports organizations calling us.
Yeah.
We just recently had a sports organization hire one of our physical therapists, and
Yeah.
instead of just hiring them, they called me, and they were like, "Hey, this is what we want to do." So
Yeah.
that's how you know the brand is working,
Yeah.
because in essence, if the brand is working, you're having that dialogue and those conversations, and so it allows you to associate yourself with other flowers that are exactly
Yeah.
what you're trying to do, and you start to smell the roses. Oh, that was good. That was good. For those, that
I
was
see what
free
you
for
did.
all of you. You see what I did there? That was not that was unintentional, but that was good. In terms of the prospect of like that, like the flowers just get better and bigger,
Yeah.
right? And so ultimately, that's how you can start to identify it.
So if I whittle it down, we could talk marketing is this, branding is that. I mean, your mission has to be tight. You said it at the beginning, is that you have to really believe what you're doing. It's fun. You're loving it. And I mean, that'll help the marketing flow from the creative side. But honestly, then once it matures and it goes, then it can become a really great brand that sells itself and solves some of the problems that, God, thousands of PT owners across the country are trying to worry about. Where am I going to get my next new grad? Maybe at Evolution, they don't have to worry about that so much, right?
Yeah.
So that's another thing of speaking to your mission and going for it. So then to close up, Brian, what do you think our listeners can take away from this that they can kind of go back to the clinics and do something with?
That's a awesome. So if you're listening to this and you're a business owner or not a business owner, I think one of the things that I do as an exercise with all my physical therapists, and again, this is where we can help people if people want to drop comments or whatever, and contact us, is learning how to brand yourself, right? Because if you
Mm-hmm.
think about how to brand yourself, you will attract those types of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't brand yourself, you're leaving other people to do the branding for you. And so ultimately, if you're in those facilities and you're in those places, what's happening is you're just at the mercy of what other people are doing. But if you actively go out and brand yourself, you actively go out and talk to people, and you do the things that you want to do, like we're talking about on this podcast, like ultimately going to do the community events, doing the run clubs, right? Getting involved with professional organizations, getting involved with high schools, and just constantly hustling and looking at that, you're in control of your narrative and can increase your brand. So I do
Yeah.
this exercise with any new PT. I'm like, who's your perfect patient? And I go, here it is. I go, here are the things you need to be doing to get that person, right?
Yep.
And they're no different than what I do to acquire more patients for us in our clinics or gym
Mm-hmm.
members or whatever. And so
Yeah.
in theory, every person who wants to do that. Now, if you don't want to do that in my clinics, that's fine too. Generally, if you join my clinics, you do. But if you
Yeah.
if you don't, what's happening is like I'm going to just do that for you, right? And so
Yeah.
in essence, you're at and I remember a physical therapist, she no longer works for us. Shocker. She was
Yeah.
like, I'm getting all the old people. I don't understand why this is happening. I go, because and I told her, I go, because I think you're finding that you're the weakest of the bunch, and
Yeah.
everybody
You're
who's
not branding
above you,
yourself.
you're not branding yourself. So what's happening is all the other athletes are going to these people,
Mm-hmm.
and what in theory, and again, in Medicare, we probably see 10%. It's not that
Mm.
much. That
Yeah.
10%, it was on 80% of her schedule. And so what's happening is she's getting stuck in that way. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, I can understand why. You're dealing with
Yeah.
a PTAT, you're dealing with me, you're dealing with, another SCS, you're dealing with all these people
Mm.
who are like really good sports clinics, and and you're kind of here. You're not
Yeah.
pushing yourself to brand yourself. And I'm going to put you in a position where you can do it, but if you don't want to do it, I can lead you to water. I can't make you drink it, right? So
Yeah.
that's what I would
So
say is do the work that builds that brand that you want to do. And if you need
and
help doing that, you leave a comment below.
you can do it at all levels. You can do it as a new staff PT, like Brian said, all the way up to a new business owner like me, all the way up to somebody really looking to grow. So, um, I think those are some great takeaways, Brian. Thank you very much for coming on to this podcast that you're a
Yeah, man.
co-host of.
Sounds good. Here every
I
week,
gotta, I gotta, I gotta work on my outros, man.
Yeah. Intros and
I don't
outros.
know. I don't know. Every single time people are going to be listening to this, like, do these guys even know what they're doing? Brian knows what he's doing. I am not a great executive producer,
I don't know.
but that's
So
fine. I'm a PT.
it works. It works well. It works well. That's where people are going to just end it anyway, so we're good.
Yeah, it's only our wives listen at this point. All
Exactly.
right.
Exactly.
See
All right. See you,
ya.
man.